Welcome to A Procurement Podcast, the Reform Rundown, with your hosts Chris Robinson and Fleur Summers.
Over the course of this series, Fleur and I will be discussing some of the main themes and concepts surrounding the Procurement Act 2023 and what it will mean to the public sector ahead of launch. Fleur and I have a combined 40 years public sector procurement experience and will be using some of that experience to share our knowledge and insights around the Act itself.
So let's get into today's topic.
Welcome to episode 14 of A Procurement Podcast, the Reform Rundown. This episode is the first of our Impressions sub-series, where Chris and I will be speaking to individuals from the sector about the Act and their interpretation ahead of go live, which of course we covered in greater detail during episode 13 and was extended to 24th of February 2025.
So I'm excited today that we are joined by a former colleague and friend of mine, Anne-Marie Cooper, who has a sector experience in both higher education and housing associations. Welcome, Anne-Marie. How are you doing?
Hi, Chris. Hi, Fleur. Thank you. Thanks for having me on this session. All good. Thank you. Still very busy on kind of the news of the latest from last week, but I'm sure we'll speak in more detail about that. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. Great to have you with us, Anne-Marie. Of course, I know you very well, but for everybody else listening, could you give us an introduction to yourself, how you fell into public sector procurement, which of course we all do.
Everyone does that.
Your career to date and experiences in and around the actual Act itself so far.
Sure. Definitely fell into procurement through various buying roles kind of early in career. Was fortunate enough to work for a large university for a long time, where kind of learnt the trade as you do, and, great opportunities to work on various commodity areas, as we would have kind of called them, and then later on more kind of capital procurements for some really exciting research type projects. Then I had a short stint working for a charity that supports young people, so quite different, but kind of still focused on the opportunities for youth in our community, I think. And then more recently moved into housing association, which again quite different, but been really fortunate again to experience lots of different projects, services, and all the influences and all the regulations on that different type of sector. So probably scarily about 20 years worth of experience there, summed up in about a minute.
So that sort of really joins ours then, Chris, doesn't it? Because we've sort of both got around 20 years experience in public sector procurement.
Yeah, and I think the depressing thought around that, and sorry to go into a downward turn early doors on this episode, but if you combined our years of experience together, you've got someone that's pushing close for their pension, haven't we, I guess, really? So, that's a sobering thought for all of us. Thank you. And I'm sure everybody listening to this episode will appreciate that introduction as well, Anne-Marie. So that's excellent. And I think what's really interesting there is like a lot of our listeners as well, I would say that, the public sector in general gives you that opportunity to have this broad spectrum in terms of goods, works and services that you procure. And of course, I know you well from working in previous organisations, of course, Anne-Marie, but whether it be higher education, whether it be for a housing association, of course, the Procurement Act itself will cover the sector at large. And I'd even go as far to say, your stint with the charitable organisations, aka the third sector, again, of course, they look to adopt and embrace procurement best practice, and by and large, what will be the Act itself. It's too in terms of moving ahead towards implementation. So, thanks again for the introduction, Anne-Marie.
No worries.
So if we start off with our first sort of area that we wanted to talk about, it'd be good to understand, Anne-Marie, so how close have you been to the Procurement Act in terms of seeing the developments to where we are today?
Okay, well, I think really, I hope other people within the sector kind of feel similar, but I think the real kind of force and started to drive things forward was really this calendar year. And everybody kind of getting involved in training and trying to immerse themselves in what's out there and gather as much information as they can. So yeah, the kind of commercial college training was really valuable, I thought. I think it was probably a difficult task to get what they needed to get into those modules, and hence why it wasn't always kind of maybe as user friendly as some people would have liked, or accessible. But I wouldn't have liked to have the task of developing that training myself, to be honest. And then I think after that, personally, and colleagues I work with at the moment, a lot of what we are getting is from other colleagues within the sector, via LinkedIn, making those connections with people in a similar situation and opening up those conversations. So yeah, trying to get as much information as possible, which sometimes is more readily available than others, or some people are more open and willing to share than others, I think, as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. This year has definitely seen an increase, hasn't it, in terms of focus on the Procurement Act, especially since April when we had like the go live announcement. There's a lot more in terms of training, webinars, events, obviously the modular training and those type of things. And yeah, obviously now it's been delayed. I'm anticipating that we're going to continue seeing all that type of information and more updates and views from everybody. But yeah, I would definitely agree. What about you, Chris, in terms of this year? You think this year we've definitely seen a massive increase in a focus on it?
Oh, for sure, definitely. And again, of course, now that we know that the go live date has been extended into 2025, 24th of February 2025, I still see that kind of momentum will continue. And, Anne-Marie's just touched on there, the unenviable task of what the Government Commercial College have actually had in terms of being able to produce that material that covers ultimately across the sector itself at large. And, you and I, Fleur, ourselves, obviously, we've dipped our toe into the water and done the modular based training. And of course, the things that we find and have noted, as I'm sure Anne-Marie did as well, was, it's difficult because, again, there's clearly gaps in terms of exclusive requirements of, say, like the housing associations and Section 21. And also then again, you consider defence and security and some of the, shall we say, exemptions, for want of a better term, that the defence and security get, and that wasn't really covered off as well, and how apparent that is and how that can be accessed and what have you. But I think again, we're all kind of in agreement here that the task that the Government Commercial College had in being able to provide something. Oh yeah, for sure, to be able to kind of provide something that's accessible to the sector at large, but also something that they can therefore apply and prepare for ahead of go live is a very difficult task. Absolutely. So, I think when Anne-Marie just mentioned there, and I think Fleur, I'm sure we did on previous episodes, we talked about one of the greatest tools and benefits that the public sector have is their ability to share information and communicate and collaborate with one another.
Yeah.
Now, Anne-Marie's just talked about it there in terms of
knowledge share.
Finding, that additional intel and that knowledge share, like you say, through communication, whether that be with fellow colleagues across the subsector that they're within, say, for example, local government or, again, housing associations and sharing that intel, or whether it be finding things like on LinkedIn, for example, and what's that saying, to be forewarned is to be forearmed. And I think that's what the sector are attempting to do at the moment as they continue to get ready for go live. Okay, then. So next question here, and something for us to ponder and discuss is around, what have you found, Anne-Marie, most interesting in terms of the Act and what it is seeking to introduce?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things, or the most interesting thing for me, is around actually the things I feel it's trying to focus on are things that we should have been focusing on all the time. I think it feels to me like a re-emphasis of those key features around maximising public benefit, getting value for money, whatever that looks like for your own organisation. Those should have always, I think, been at the forefront of our thinking when we enter into a procurement or into a project. So I think on reflection, it feels for me like this is a reinforcement of what good is, and maybe an opportunity for a lot of contracting authorities to just revisit that when they're looking at their own processes, their own kind of procurement guidelines, and what that looks like for them individually. I think things around, the innovation options that we're going to have, the more focus on social value, the SME considerations, and generally, I feel it's just about being more transparent and held to account. And I kind of see that as an opportunity, really, as I've said, to revisit those processes, but also an opportunity to reflect and kind of reconsider what those procurement departments want to be achieving and what they can achieve. So I think initially it all felt kind of a bit overwhelming, and it is a huge change. But having had that kind of time to reflect myself, I think it is just a positive opportunity to get things right again, to kind of reset the scale maybe.
Yeah.
No, I'd agree with that. Fleur, I heard the word transparency there, and I think, it'd be wrong for me to speak toward that because it's certainly your favourite subject. So, just picking up on that and what, and again, Anne-Marie used the word reflecting on what Anne-Marie's just said there. Transparency there, of course, is a key theme, I think, for sure.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I mean, I think like what Anne-Marie says, it's almost just reinforcing or bringing that focus back again to what the key points are. I mean, transparency has always been there, hasn't it? There's always been the need to do certain notices and those type of things. I think it's just making it more focused on the fact that these are now mandatory. There isn't because some of the notices there, it wasn't mandatory, it was a decision as to whether you published it or not. And it's almost like saying, well, actually, no, you have to do it now. So it's almost just bringing that focus a bit more to the forefront. And I don't see there's any issue in being more transparent in terms of how you're procuring. As long as you are doing what you said you always would do, there shouldn't be an issue in having all these extra notices and everything that you're publishing. So I just think it's bringing it all back again and making everyone focus on key areas.
Definitely. I'll tell you something that really was of note for me from what Anne-Marie's just mentioned there. And actually, I don't think, Fleur, that anybody else we've spoken to date, whether it be, through the podcast series or through independent conversations we've been having with the sector, but it was the point where, Anne-Marie was just suggesting there that actually there was nothing necessarily wrong with the current regulations, the public contract regulations themselves. And of course, they've been embedded within the public sector for such a long time now. However, when you think about, the announcement that the Cabinet Office made back in January of 2021, it was the headline grabbing detail from that was, the opportunity to slash around 350 or so red tape restrictions, I think was the line that they actually used. But to what Anne-Marie's just said there was that there was nothing wrong per se, or it is wrong with the existing regulations. We know the reasons why the Procurement Act is in play, and of course how that has come about. But actually, it's about improvement. The Procurement Act 2023 it should provide us with an opportunity to improve upon what we have already, and whether that be through transparency or any of the themes that we cover, then that's a positive step. Absolutely.
It's almost just modernising it, isn't it? It's bringing it back up to date into where we are now.
Great. Yeah. No, definitely. An act that is future-proofed. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so we've sort of touched on some of these topics in that last sort of question, but do you think that the Act has done enough to support drives towards social value, SMEs and innovative procurement?
Yeah, it feels connected, doesn't it? I think again, it shines a light on those areas that should have been in consideration, perhaps would have been in consideration more in certain procurements than others. But again, a positive move that we're kind of getting closer to those things and trying to delve and understand a little bit more, and that driving attention to them. I think that they are important. I feel like this is something that, again, will probably develop over time, when we've got a few new procurements under our belts, that these things won't stand still. Again, the transparency comes in. I'm a big fan as well, Fleur. Like, there should be nothing to hide, should there? I think there might be kind of more learning around some of the wording in these areas is still quite flexible, I feel, the have regard wording. Yeah. But again, I feel like it's that positive opportunity to be doing good procurement, to be considering the right things for that particular procurement that you're working on. And that will vary, won't it? Obviously, depending on what you are looking to buy or what the market's got to offer. And I think as well, for consideration in these areas is the proportionality measures.
Definitely, yeah.
And that is difficult to, when we're thinking about new processes and what those procurements will look like, that's quite difficult to document or to provide guidance on. I think it's a bit of a suck it and see, and one size won't fit all here. But as we've touched on, I think what we can all do is those collaborative conversations, sharing what we've done and how it's worked, and having those post-award kind of wash-ups, a bit of an evaluation of what worked well and what didn't work well. I think in this area as well, it might start to show where teams have skills gaps, on that refresh. And as you said, Chris, the future proofing of our procurements now, if we're moving towards that kind of picture, for those of us who've been in procurement a long time, do we need to refresh some of those areas of our learning? Again, an opportunity, I think personally, that should be viewed quite positively. And if we can drive more social value, if we can involve more SMEs, if that ultimately encourages more innovative solutions or local opportunities, then it's got to be a good thing, in my opinion.
Yeah. And do you know something, Fleur? A sign of an excellent guest is when they steal your thunder about what you're about to say. And Anne-Marie's absolutely done that. She stole my have regard to thunder. But no, I absolutely agree with everything you mentioned there. And I'm sure all our listeners will resonate with that. Coming from a bitter and twisted ex-public sector procurement professional here, as you say, the themes around social value and SMEs have been around for donkey's years now. They really have. Hopefully, within the narrative of the Act, albeit a little bit fluffy in places, then, the sector themselves will start to think of it a little bit more around what they can do to get tangible, beneficial outcomes and encourage, social value outcomes, whether that be through using tools like the social value portal, perhaps, or using the TOMs, the themes, outcomes and measures within that, and then looking at their lotting strategies and how they package those up in such a way that they're more attractive to SMEs. I also think as well, I'm sure Fleur will agree on this, that the sector will look at some of the larger consortium providers for a steer on this, the likes of Crown Commercial Services, Eastern Shires Purchasing Organisation, the various higher education, Southern Universities Purchasing Organisations, one that jumps or springs to mind here, in housing associations, perhaps, the procurement for housing, looking at those framework providers. And what they do is almost like a benchmark to not necessarily copy, but to aspire to. They'll have the resources and the time and effort to think about how they can truly drive value through these consortium-led framework and contract opportunities. Fleur, any more on that, you think?
I was going to say, it's that learning from others, isn't it? It's that learning from those ones that explore this first. I mean, as you say, social value has been around for a while and has been incorporated into procurements. I guess this now just brings it to the forefront and explicitly sort of makes it clearer that you can have social value as part of it, but some might not have explored that as much as others up until now. So there's definitely still going to be that learning, and learning and understanding from others as to how they've done it and starting to incorporate that into procurements going forwards, I think we'll see.
Definitely, I'd agree with that. So the next question here, or the other item I certainly want to look to cover here is do you think, Anne-Marie, that there's anything in relation to the Act that requires further explanation? This might need an episode on its own, but let's. What's your view and take on that?
Short answer, yes. But I always want all the information,
Exactly.
And I think that's what makes. Well, personally, that's what makes the changes quite kind of anxiety-inducing. It's the unknown, isn't it? We don't know how the first procurement's going to go. We don't know what the challenges might be yet. And I think, like I said, until you've kind of got a few under your belt, that feeling probably won't go away. So yeah, some kind of bedding in time, some learning time. We're all going to have to bite the bullet sooner or later. But I think what would have been really helpful is some kind of more examples, maybe some more scenario type training or conversations, and maybe as you've kind of both mentioned, maybe those will now come from the likes of our consortia and our framework providers, that let's just talk about, scenario A, B and C and what happened and how we could plan that out and what were the pitfalls were. I think there's got to be some more learning from that, but that probably won't come, well, especially now with kind of looking at February, that might not come for a few more months. And I think whoever does it first is probably quite brave to kind of be open and honest about we should have done this, or next time we definitely do that. But again, I hope all of this kind of newness to everyone just encourages some of that. That people are quite open and, almost maybe having some events around scenarios or what went wrong events, I think would be really useful.
I really like that idea in terms of scenarios. Obviously, I'm not sure, given the timescales, but it would almost be really good, wouldn't it, to almost have a scenario walking through from very start to the very
Absolutely.
end.
Yeah.
And you're almost seeing okay, so you do market engagement, great, and what you're trying to achieve from it, and then you publish this notice, and then you did this and did that, and it's almost like taking it from that very beginning point right round, and it links back to Chris what we've been talking about in some previous episodes in terms of a procurement life cycle, in terms of going round the steps and seeing, okay, so now we do that, and then we do this, and almost just it helps you sort of picture it a bit clearer maybe, because you can visibly see or picture yourself in the procurement process, and okay, so I do that at that step and that's where it comes in, rather than just all the guidance documents and those type of things. But that might be quite difficult to get to. That's quite a lot of work if you do it, because obviously there'll be, well, what about this and what about that? But yeah, I totally agree. Some sort of scenario just to maybe see how things actually should work could be quite useful.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. And, the sector, as a sector, we all know that we like a good handrail, not necessarily a how do I guide, because I think, individual organisations within the sector there'll be various nuances in terms of how they engage with the market and how they undertake certain activities at particular stages. Fleur, you talk about the episodes that we've done around the SIPS purchasing and supply cycle, where we go through each one of those steps. But even that, as we caveat it throughout those two episodes, is open
There's
to
so much,
interpretation.
yeah.
Oh, for sure.
We didn't touch on everything at all.
No, and it's very difficult to do that. And I think actually that then amplifies the difficulties that the Cabinet Office have had in trying to get the balance right, in terms of they want to be able to, as we've discussed already, produce and issue out and act on regulations that sit behind it that are innovative, they're future-proofed, they encourage SME support and participation, and obviously look to invigorate opportunities around social value and tangible benefits around that. So all this good stuff, but also by the same token, the sector would, as Anne-Marie said there, appreciate and certainly benefit for some scenario basis in terms of how to carry out particular activities. Not to follow, verbatim, but just a rough idea, because the reality of it is, and as I often say, of course, is that nobody wants to be that first test case organisation that falls foul of the Act itself. So I think, Anne-Marie, what she said already about tentative first steps and watching what others are doing. And I love the idea. I truly do. I love the idea around workshops around how particular instances, situations, best practice learning have come from organisations as they've started to venture into the new world of following the Act and the regulations within. I think there's some real value in the sector for that, for sure.
Definitely, like the learning and knowledge share, as we talked at the very beginning, something that the public sector is really good at. Okay, so what have you seen organisations do in preparation for go live?
I think what's got to be up there is a look at your pipeline. I think that was a real kind of a more easy thing to look at. When the thing's expiring, what's new, what's coming up.
Yeah.
And really trying to engage with your internal stakeholders to understand what that looks like. We all think we've got a handle on our workload, and then something pops up, doesn't it? And you think, where we're going to fit this one in. So I think that's probably good to try and get to a less reactive position within the teams, and get a bit of a hold on what's coming up in the next maybe 12, 24 months at least. I touched on before, and I think what's also I've seen is a bit of the analysis of what the team's skills are. When you sit within a team of a number of people, some people are really good at negotiating, some have run 100 different procurements, some people are more specialist. So I think it's opened up that kind of that view of what have we got within the team, or what do we need to invest in. Obviously updates to documentation, process plans. There's a long list there, isn't it? And I think you spoke about it on a previous podcast of, all of that pack, all of our tender pack, and getting that up to date and relevant to the new Act. I think there's been probably a piece around as well. What really is a priority? What's urgent now? Because with the opportunity to be more flexible within the new Act, do we want to wait? Is there interim solutions we can put in place that would mean the new procurement would be more effective ultimately? And with the delay as well, with the going into February, I think organisations, unfortunately, might have to do a bit of that again. If people were waiting for October to do a more flexible piece, do they want to wait until February? Can they wait until February to do that? Or I think that unfortunately might cause a bit of duplication of effort there, and organisations might now need to reprioritise and decide what the best route to market might be. Obviously, looking at the options they've got in each case. One positive thing, I guess, is that now organisations do have a little bit more time, because I think, as we've said, it was quite a daunting list of activities under there, and maybe now there's more time. That should be taken as a bit of a gift of time to do the bits we didn't get to, or to relook at the bits we did do, with kind of that more time, not being rushed, to give opportunity to just make sure it is right, especially those key process documents before February now.
Yeah, definitely. I love the idea of almost like a skills identification gap analysis exercise amongst your team members. I think that's a fantastic idea, that. And, and also by the same token, this identification that the Act is new for all of us.
Everybody.
Whether you be bitter and twisted with 20 years plus public sector procurement experience, like every one of us on this call, as individuals, or or you're new into the profession, perhaps maybe you're a graduate, or maybe you just obtained your academic studies and then new into the profession itself, or new to the public sector but been in procurement roles in other sectors previously. The Act itself and the regulations are, of course, as new to them as they are to anybody. So I think it's all that upskilling, what we talked about before in terms of training and conversations, whether that be from the government commercial college or elsewhere. Any kind of information and insights can certainly, give you that better rounded knowledge and hopefully preparation that you need ahead of this now extended window for go live. Fleur, do you have any more on that?
No, I really like the bit around the skills in the team. Obviously, some people in teams are going to have more skills in terms of like the sourcing side, and then obviously some people will have more skills in the contract management side of process. So it's understanding where everybody's skills lie, I guess, and that's probably a key thing in terms of because everyone will have different areas they need to upskill on and learn more about. So yeah, I thought that was a really good, and obviously like the prioritization of what needs to be done, really, because I guess if one way you could look at it is, the first things you're going to need is all your sourcing documents, your procurement documents, your templates and those type of things, because you're not going to get to contract management for a while until you've done your procurement. So I guess it's almost like, what is it that you really need to have ready and available to go live to run that first procurement? And that's going to be all your processes and your tender documents. So that really should be a priority. So yeah, those sort of things, like understanding the skills of your team, prioritization of work and activities that need to be done. And as you say, there is more time now to be able to pick up on anything that hadn't been done before.
Definitely, which leads us into nicely the next question that we have here, which I think in part, Anne-Marie, you've kind of covered already. But what would your top tips be, for organisations within the sector when it comes to them preparing for go live?
Yeah, make the most of the extra time. I think the last few days, I think, was it entirely unexpected? Maybe not. But we've got some extra time now, so. Yeah, learn what you can, kind of immerse yourself in those groups and events that are being kind of advertised via LinkedIn and our colleagues. Definitely. I think, as you've both touched on, let's just prepare as much as possible, but with the focus on what is essential at this time. Definitely, Fleur, I agree that you might not get to those other stages of the process for, months maybe down the line. So it doesn't all have to be urgent. And I think just breaking down those sections will make it a little bit more manageable. I think we've still got to think about how we manage two sets of regs and the overlap where for a number of years, some procurements will still be regulated by old regs. So how do we kind of differentiate between the two? Do they have different references? Do we colour code them, but just to be as organised as possible, I think. I just think read as much as possible, use the time as wisely as possible, get your plan in place and stick to it.
Yeah, you pointed out one of the key things we've discussed before, and I think it came up on one of, I think it was the episode with Kieran, Chris, where we talked about some sort of identifier in terms of showing which contracts or procurements are under which regulations, because that's going to be really key, because for a long time, there's going to be contracts that could be in place that are still being managed under the existing regulations. So having some clear way of being able to say, I don't know, in your contracts register, for example, and being able to see, okay, so that contract is under which regulations, I think that is going to be a key thing that contracting authorities need to have a look at in determining how it's going to work best for them, just in terms of management and understanding, and being able to quickly from a glance know, okay, that's under that regulations or those regulations. I think that is a good activity that they need to be doing.
Definitely. It's a practical tip, and one that, I other than the conversation with Kieran, you say that I don't recall us ever kind of revisiting or hearing about again, whether that be through our conversations or whether it be through, the cabinet office or any of the training they've actually provided. But what a useful tip and technique to adopt, and having the ability to make that quick identification. Okay, it's this procurement. Oh, what regs was it procured under now? Okay, what are we following here? And it's that, it's an ease of use tool that will hopefully simplify things and technique for the sector, as they do, and will be for quite some time, of course, having to manage between two sets of regulations.
Okay, so I think this is coming towards one of our last questions, Anne-Marie. But so how do you see the Act developing, changing post go live?
Oh yeah. Crystal ball, I think, a bit, isn't it? A bit, but that different approach to how we plan our procurements, I think, how we consider things like social value, SMEs, I think all of that will start in one place, and give it 6-12 months or maybe 4 or 5 procurements could look quite different across that space of time. I think there'll just be more learning needed, and people will kind of need to seek that out perhaps in some places, or almost create that kind of opportunity, like we said, with scenarios, or when there's examples out there, that people start doing their own bit of analysis as to looking at what others have done, being aware of what new challenges we might face as contracting authorities, and that worry around falling foul of any of the regulations. Again, I think the best way to defend against that is our learning, is to just being open to others' kind of comments, their opinions, and how that would fit with the way we work in our own organisations. These updates were needed, weren't they? I think, for some it feels like a long time coming. And again, with change, there's that opportunity. It should be exciting, but it's also a bit daunting. I think it's just a case of things will develop, things will change, and we just need to go into those situations with our eyes wide open, and going back to the basics of our procurement around being transparent, being open, trying to do the best with public money, and really stick to those basics, which I think I touched on at the start, is for me in that regard that flows through from old regs to new regs, as it should. So yeah, I think it's an exciting time, not without its challenges, but it's kind of exciting to think, where will we be in 18-24 months, when things have settled. Yeah.
It's almost like, I totally agree about what you're saying, all the areas you mentioned. And I guess it's almost like we just need to go into it with a bit of an open mind, don't we? It's like, I totally agree, it's like exciting, but at the same time it's daunting, but it'd be interesting to see what we can achieve from it.
Absolutely.
And it's almost like at the end of like procurements, I know we always talk about like lessons learned and those sort of things, but it's almost like, how did it work? Did this work? Did that work? Or it didn't work? So, okay, what could we do in different procurements? And then that moves into like learnings for like people that are running the procurement, like the next procurement or their next procurement, for example. And it's almost each authority is going to build up their own what works and what doesn't work. It's going to be an interesting time.
It will.
What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I think it'd be foolish for any of us to actually think that, the Act isn't going to change and there's going to be this period of, for argument's sake, 12, 24 months when there's going to be no variation whatsoever. Of course, there's going to be things such as the legal precedents that fall out of it when, unfortunately, organisations do fall foul. And to your very valid point there, PPNs. And I'll make a very safe bet with in that, unlike my Saturday afternoon football accumulation, formulators, that I think that there will be a good number within the next 12 months of PPNs that are issued post go live in the original, or what will be the original content of the Act itself. Of course, it's going to change. It's in a live environment. It's going to be stress test from a legal perspective. And the point that the pair of you have actually made is that it's going to continue to change and evolve as people use it. Definitely
agree.
Okay, then. So I think that's all we've got time for today. Thanks again to Anne-Marie for taking the time out of her busy schedule to talk to us and provide such valuable insights. Anne-Marie, genuinely, it's really, really appreciated. So thanks again.
Yeah, it's been great speaking to you today. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Excellent. And so as ever, make sure that you continue to look out for our future episodes on Amazon, Apple, Spotify, where next time we will continue with our Impressions sub-series.
Thank you, everyone, and see you in the next episode.